and welcome back to Funeral Industry Insights. This is a podcast where we talk about one of life's toughest subjects and the different aspects of the funeral industry. I'm your host, Michelle Dwyer, and today's episode we're answering a big question that comes up quite a lot for families, and that's, do you legally need to apply for probate in New South Wales? It's one of those terms you hear when dealing with an estate, but it's not always clear when probate is necessary, when it's optional, and what the consequences are if you don't apply for probate. So let's break it down. First things first, what actually is probate? So probate's a legal process that's handled by the Supreme Court of New South Wales. So when you apply for probate, the court essentially is checking two things. One, that your loved one has had a legal will and that it's valid. And then two, that the person named as the executor has that legal authority to carry out the wishes that are in that will. So once probate is granted, it acts like a certificate of authority. So banks, superannuation companies, insurers, land registry officers, they all recognise it as a proof that the executor has that authority to deal with your loved one's assets. Okay, so here's the important part. There's no actual blanket rule that probate is always required. Okay, so in New South Wales, probate's only needed if the organisations that hold your loved one's assets insist on it before releasing funds. Okay, so whether or not you need to apply depends on the type and the size of the estate. So probate is typically required when the estate is substantial or it involves more complex assets. So common examples include real estate that's owned solely by your loved one, or if it's a tenants in common. So to transfer or sell any of that property, the Land Registry Office will require probate. Okay, so also large bank accounts. So most major banks in New South Wales have a threshold. Often it's around $50,000. If the account holds more than that, then the bank will likely demand that probate has been done before they'll release the funds. Also shares and investments. So if the value of shares and investments are high, the registry will require probate before they transfer ownership. Superannuation and insurance is very much the same. So paid directly to the estate rather than a nominated beneficiary. Then probate is needed there as well to be able to release those funds. So in short, if there's significant money or property tied up in your loved one's name, then probate is almost always necessary. Okay, on the other hand, probate may not be necessary for smaller or more straightforward estates. Okay, so if there's property that's jointly owned, so if a house or a bank account is joint ownership, then it usually passes automatically to that surviving co-owner, which is outside of probate. Okay, smaller bank accounts. So many banks will release funds without probate if that balance is below their threshold. So as I mentioned before, most are around the $50,000 mark, but they might just simply ask for a death certificate and usually a signed indemnity form. Personal belongings like furniture, jewelry, household items, they usually don't require probate to transfer to beneficiaries. So if the estate's modest or if assets are jointly held, the executor might not actually need to apply at all. Now, you might be wondering, if probate isn't always legally required, then why would anyone bother with it? Well, look, in all honesty, the answer lies in protection. Okay, so when the Supreme Court grants probate, it gives the executor legal cover. So if the executor distributes the estate in good faith, relying on the probate grant, they're protected from claims down the track. For example, if a newer will's found or if someone challenges the estate, if an executor skips probate when they probably should have applied, they could personally be held liable for any mistakes. So for that reason, probate isn't just about unlocking assets, It's about also making sure that the executor is legally safeguarded. So everything we've discussed so far assumes that there is a valid will. So what happens if there isn't? Okay, so in that case, probate doesn't apply. Instead, the closest next of kin, which is usually a spouse or a child or a parent, they'll apply for what's called letters of administration. Okay, so letters of administration, they work much like probate does. However, well, what it does is it gives a formal authority to someone to manage the estate and distribute the estate. Okay, the key difference is that distribution follows the intestacy laws of New South Wales rather than a will. Okay, so your loved one has not got control over who gets what in their estate if there's no will. So to sum up the differences, probate is confirming that a valid will is there and granting the named executor as the authority. Letters of administration is used when there's no valid will, and it gives authority to the next of kin to distribute the estate under intestacy rules. So both processes are handled by the Supreme Court and both serve the same purpose, okay? Providing certainty and protection when dealing with a deceased's estate. Okay, so if you're an executor and you're unsure whether probate is required, here's a simple approach. List the assets, okay? Include the property, bank accounts, investments, superannuation, all personal items, okay? Check ownership. Are they owned solely by your loved one, okay? Or are they jointly held? Contact the institution, like call banks, superannuation funds, share registries, ask what their requirements are for releasing funds. And then if you're unclear, just seek advice. Contact a solicitor. They'll advise you whether probate is advisable in your situation. Okay, so sometimes even if not strictly necessary, families do choose to apply for probate simply for that peace of mind and also the protection that it does provide. Okay, so do you legally need to apply for probate in New South Wales? The short answer is not always. Okay, again, it just depends on the size, type of assets, the complexity of the estate, and on the requirements of the organisations that hold the assets. Okay, that's really what it comes down to. But remember, probate isn't just a formality. It's a safeguard, both for the estate and for the executor, that everything is handled lawfully and with certainty. Okay, so that's it for today's episode. I hope it's been clear. It's cleared up some of the confusion around probate in New South Wales. If you're facing this process, remember you don't have to do it alone. Professional advice is always available to guide you through. Thank you so much for joining me. Please remember to subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcasts. And until next time, take care and look after each other.